Hello, football fans. Welcome to week 12 of the Scuffed Football Podcast. This is Noah. I'm Ted. Here to cover the previous weeks, plural. Talk stories, scores, fantasy, gambling, the whole thing. Just to lead off, I want to apologize for missing the podcast last across the country. Couldn't squeeze that one in. Not here to short sell you. We did make our picks for the week on Twitter. Are going to cover games from both these weeks. Get both and week 11 coverage. Good place to start, obviously, week 10, Monday night. Fortunately, Eagles took an L, and a pretty bad L to Washington. I didn't get to watch a whole lot of that game, just with all my travel and stuff, but the Eagles did not look. What did you see, Noah, that made you feel like Washington picked the Eagles apart?
I mean, again, like we've seen the Eagles performed great in the first quarter. They started off a game good. It was still sloppy in a sense, but, they still scored 14. It was 14-7 end of the first quarter there. But then having no answer in general in the second quarter or even right after halftime, putting up a dud and just letting kind of the Commanders have their way definitely surprised me. Again, we haven't seen that from the Eagles. This is their first loss. I've been expecting it, unlike you. I didn't think it would come against the Commanders. I got to say, it was definitely not what I thought they would lose to, especially with Tyler Heineke. Again, it's not even Carson Wentz, who has, some decent games sometimes. But again, it just wasn't what I expected. And the Eagles just looked flat-footed. So,
yeah, I from what I did see, I mean, Heineke played a really good game. I mean, I've argued before, and I'll argue again, that I think he's still the best quarterback in Washington, and Wentz never should have had that starting job. But Washington just looked so much more put together from what I did see. The big takeaway from this for me is not necessarily the Eagles losing, but more what it means for the rest of the season. I mean, Eagles, even with that loss, still have a 2-game lead currently on the division. They're pretty handedly in front of the rest of the NFC as well to still get their first round playoffs. But I think, at least in my head, it takes a whole lot of pressure off to not be constantly pressured with, well, they haven't lost yet. I think it makes it a whole lot easier to go into games like your next game against the Cowboys or games against the Titans, the Packers that have on their calendar. I feel like it takes a lot of pressure off that you can play that game instead of focusing on a whole 17-0 season, which I think is weirdly an advantage.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. Like we had discussed that a little bit just through our text. But again, like I do think that now the Eagles are just kind of free to just play ball. Like they don't have to, confide and try to be perfect like this entire season. Now that we've seen them technically not be perfect one game, like it doesn't matter. I know we discussed other expectations from other teams, but again, like I feel like the Eagles going into this season, it wasn't have a perfect season. It wasn't even like, win a Super Bowl. It was more of like make the playoffs, make some noise, and then we'll see. But, seeing this in general and then finally seeing them lose, I think it does take a lot of pressure off of them.
Yeah. I did mention a couple games from the Eagles schedule, which brings us to a different Week 10 game in the Packers and the Cowboys. This was honestly a really good game. I did not expect it to be close to be this competitive. I sure as hell didn't expect the Packers to come away with that with a win. But despite a pretty similar first half from Green Bay, where Rodgers, I think, again, only threw the ball 7 times before halftime, he staged a pretty good comeback and made it a really competitive game against the Cowboys. And I think it not only speaks to the fact that like Aaron Rodgers is still around and ready to play ball, but maybe that at this point in time, what I thought at least, that the Cowboys weren't necessarily as much of a competitor in the NFC as I thought they were.
Right. Okay. So thinking back 2 weeks ago, I would have the exact same. Like again, we're not seeing the same, strong Packers team. So yes, them losing in OT, it definitely 2 weeks ago would have made me just kind of like be down on the Cowboys again. Like I've seen them choke before. We all have. So again, like seeing them kind of lose this game, it was kind of like okay, maybe they're not as good as we thought they were. Especially losing to a weakened Packers team. We'll talk more later about that. But again, definitely 2 weeks ago, Cowboys not contenders.
Yeah, I also like weirdly, as much as I'd love to see Aaron Rodgers just be done so we can stop making so much noise about him, it was kind of nice to see him still have it in him. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, it was a comeback win. He played really well in the second half of that game. I guess it's just weird that we can watch him have that kind of performance in the second half, still only using him to throw the ball 7 times before halftime.
Yeah. I mean, again, we've seen, again, it's just a weaker team. I don't think he has as many weapons. So I think they're leaning more on the run game, but still, I still didn't expect them to actually beat Dallas.
Definitely a good game to watch. If you missed it, it was 2 weeks old. You can find it on the internet now. The last game I've got from week 10, we're my team losing, Noah's team losing. This was genuinely game of the year. It would be very hard to top it. We watched the catch of the year with Justin Jefferson. I still have no idea how he roped that ball in. Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen, let alone just catch of the year.
There was a good drive there where it was just Jefferson just reaching up and grabbing something. It was actually incredible to watch. So
I don't know that I would have gotten a fingertip on that ball that he roped in one-handed, ripping it away from a defender. Man, Justin Jefferson is something.
It was called an interception right there, and then he just ripped it away, and that was crazy.
Absolutely incredible. But I think this game spoke a lot. It's been a few weeks since we've talked about strength tests, but I thought this was a really good measure for both teams. I think to start with, first off, I think it probably humbles the Bills a little bit. I mean, I guess my biggest concern from it, when we saw Josh Allen as a rookie, even in college somewhat, like a lot of his issues were controlling the ball, not turning it over, and making good decisions. We saw a couple of interceptions in really, really awful spots in that.
Well, continue. Sorry.
Go ahead. Have at it.
Again, this is I've thought a lot about this game actually because Bills fan. I don't think it's so much as a strength test to the Bills as I think it's a strength test to Allen. Like again, in the past 2 weeks before this past, so like this game against the Vikings and then the week before, week 9, he's thrown for a combined 4 red zone interceptions. Like those are 4 like critical moments. Again, like if he doesn't throw that interception in OT, then Bills win that game 100%. It doesn't matter. But again, he did. So you can't say that. But again, that's 4 times in the red zone that we could have come up with points. So I think it's more of a strength test to Allen. It's kind of like an awakening for him. Like he needs to clean it up. I think the Bills performed great, and they showed that against a top team in the league at the time. They can put it up and they can fight, but unfortunately we lost. But again, like that was a great game. There's literally only so much you can do against Justin Jefferson, and I was in awe. And I'm a Bills fan, and what is happening?
We were actually texting each other at the end of that game, just like both of us are like, all right, Bills could do it. Bills could do it. Oh wait, look, oh shit. All right, there it goes. Interesting enough that you talk about the strength test for Josh Allen. I mean, been several times on this podcast that both of us have said that Josh Allen is that dude, and he takes over late in games, and he's winning it himself. He's just whatever I got to do at the end of this game to do it. And largely in the last drive in overtime, I thought he did up until the interception. It was just very bizarre to see. It was strange. It was an anomaly against the Jets. When it happens again against the Vikings, where he's throwing another red zone interception late in the game, like it feels weird, almost like he's putting too much on himself. And I hope he can bounce back to form and start winning games for his team again. Not that I have any doubts about Josh Allen, of course. Still think he's in that MVP race, but still very, very different than what we had seen earlier in the season. But
Right. And I mean, again, you had said that it's a strength test for both teams. I think this was the Vikings' signature win that they needed at the time. Like this proved that maybe they were good enough to actually be considered a top contender. And again, for the Bills, it showed that they could still put up a fight. But I think winning it would have been a little bit different. And I think even if the Vikings, if it was like switched, so it was like Vikings 30 and then the Bills 33, I think that people would recognize that the Vikings put up a really good fight against a really good team. And I think that still would have been a statement for them, even though they hadn't won. if that had happened. But winning in general against Buffalo is a tall task, and Justin Jefferson is just
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree because like I don't think people were taking the Vikings seriously. I mean, listening to any of the talking heads on ESPN or any one of these other, sports outlets, their whole thing was that the competitors were the Eagles, the Bills, the Chiefs. Every couple of them would put the 49ers in there, but I mean, genuinely, the only real tough task that the Vikings had had up until the point against the Bills was the Eagles. Obviously, they lost, but like you look at the Vikings from a couple of seasons ago and in signature moments since where especially in primetime games or big opponents, like they can look as good as they want in any other week, but in the ones where it really matters, they don't necessarily show up. I think to show up that way against the Bills, like you said, win or loss, is a really big deal.
exactly.
However, we're going to use this opportunity to jump to this most recent week, week 11, follow up on the Vikings again. They do not take the momentum from beating the Bills, really making a statement and announcing themselves. They lose 40-3 against the Cowboys. It's really interesting with the talking points we just had about the last two games that it was weird to see the Cowboys lose one to the Packers, who aren't that good, and the Vikings make a big statement win against the Bills, and then this game was so one-sided.
Right, agreed. I mean, like I was so close to saying, like, I had even agreed with you that the Vikings were going to beat the Cowboys. I thought it too, and I was close to like getting ready to say on this podcast that they were going to be contenders. I was so close. I was so close, and they might still be because Justin Jefferson can carry that team anywhere. But the drubbing that they caught from the Cowboys was absolutely crazy. And I loved seeing it because again, like we didn't see that Cowboys, and maybe it wasn't like the Vikings didn't have as good of a game, obviously, putting up just three. But I don't know if that speaks to more of them having a bad week or the Cowboys are just that much better than the Vikings to put up 37 more points than them. Again, it was just it feels really good to just feel that loss for the Vikings. Like, we really thought you guys were something, and now it's just like, oh yeah, to the Cowboys. So again, I think that's also a statement win though for the Cowboys. Like I think they're kind of like, okay, well, we had a bad week and then we stomped on a possible contender. So I was really happy to see that.
The weird part about this game for me was I still don't really trust the Vikings defense. Like I don't know how good they are, but in most of their wins this season, you've seen that it doesn't matter what their defense plays like, whether it's good, whether it's bad, or anywhere in between, that the offense can always show up. You can just throw the ball to Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen. You can run the ball. There's so many things that this offense can do. They seem impossible to stop. Their offense never got started, which was really, really strange. But while we're on their about their defense, they struggled so much because I think the Cowboys finally figured out a running. I mean, if you've been listening to any one of these big shows, they've been talking about, should you be, more interested in Tony Pollard than you are in Zeke? And it's been going back and forth all season. Does Zeke's paycheck means that he gets more playing time or whatever? This was the first time I've seen the Cowboys effectively use the system in a very long time. But both of those guys were looking.
Yeah, again, like it wasn't a one man show. Like they used their second string running back, and they used them so well. It was like again, I'm saying that Pollard has been like the guy. We haven't seen Elliott be as strong. I felt like and you again, like we had discussed that before, and to see them use both of them, utilize them well. Oh, that was scary.
Their running game looks terrifying. This is the first time that I've been like genuinely worried about the Cowboys offense. I like obviously they're good. They've been good forever. Their offensive line has been 70s. They've always like Dak Prescott's a really great quarterback, but to see them finally be able to utilize all of their weapons and in a way that makes sense, being able to switch guys in and out, different receivers, different running backs, like everybody on that offense had a really, really good day. I think the Cowboys have finally made their offense something to be scared of this season.
Well, let's not go overreactions. They still got to keep doing it. Just doing it one time is not good enough. So
Sure, I'm not saying that this one game should be evidence of everything they're always capable of doing, but like the one thing that made sense to me wasn't just it wasn't Zeke and or Tony Pollard just happening to be the right guy for that particular play. They were calling plays around these guys. They were using them both at the same time. They put them both on the field and then didn't go to either one of them to open up the passing game because you have to worry about both. Like the play calling using both of them so much sense. They really opened themselves up. And I think it's something that's easily repeatable, even if it's not the same level of success. Like I think it does create so many openings for their offense that would make them scary to game plan against as a defense next 7 games.
yeah, right.
Um, the other question I've got about that game is if you were to repeat that game, obviously they don't play against each other for the rest of the regular season, but do we expect that game if they meet up again in the playoffs? Would we expect that game to go the same way, or would we expect it to be more? I mean, we've seen the Cowboys lose to not so great opponents. We watched Minnesota beat a team like the Bills, who is still an AFC favorite. Um, is this something that the Cowboys can repeat, or would Minnesota make a statement if we saw them again?
Uh, I don't technically. I don't know if the Vikings would still win that game. I do think if it was a repeat, they meet in the playoffs. I think it would be a lot closer. Obviously, it wouldn't be this 40-3 route that we've seen. I would expect that the Vikings like would show up. Um, but again, like if we see this high scoring numbers that these Cowboys are playing with, like, and they can keep going with the consistency, then it could be a really high scoring game. I'd love to see it. But again, like I think it would be the same result in a sense that I think the Cowboys would win if they keep this offense going. Rather, but it wouldn't be like a blowout.
Yeah, I don't know that what Dallas did on defense is repeatable, right? Their offense is scary. It's good if they can continue this kind of game planning. I think that they continue to achieve that same level of, but I don't think what they did on defense was necessarily consistent or something that could be consistent. You haven't watched the
Right.
Cowboys defense be this good ever. Um, I I think it's an important measure of what we think about both of these teams is to take away this game and compare it to what we think would happen if they played it. I think it makes both of them very real threats for the NFC. Not necessarily this game for the Vikings, but their overall body of work. Um, I I would be interested to see this game happen again. I'm kind of rooting for it in the playoffs because I want it to look different than this. But I really think that this is, you saying that you think the Cowboys would win again would indicate that maybe the Vikings aren't really contenders for the NFC if that's the kind of thing that we would expect for the future. I just think it's important to remember this one by the time we get to playoffs and see.
Well, again, like if it had been closer, if the Cowboys or like the Vikings had lost respectively, I would think that the Vikings would win. But this 37 point, like unbeknownst, like the Cowboys haven't won a game by 37 points in a very long time. So,
Ever.
and especially against a team we were about to call a contender is just like it just puts me so down on the Vikings. Like, yes, it might have been a bad game, and I won't go back up on them until I see more consistency. But having a drubbing like this, like if they had lost 17-20, I would be like, okay, they're still contenders. Like they just had a bad game. But again, 37 is just like unforgivable.
Yeah, I'm with you to an extent. I'm still a believer that getting hot at the right times is important. If they put together their best games of the season, like I still think the Vikings should count themselves out first, right? Like they can still believe in themselves. Vikings fans can still have something to hope for that they can win a Super Bowl if they play the right game at the right time. But this just has to get way the hell out of their system before that's anything close.
Yeah.
Another game I want to talk about was the Patriots and the Jets. I know the score was 10-3. If you watch this, a lot of people like offense, so most people would have considered it very boring. However, for me personally, there's two main takeaways. Um, First is that both of these teams have incredibly good defenses. I know that neither quarterback really played that well. Neither team got their run game started, but I attribute a lot of that watching that game start to finish. A lot of that game was defense to me. Like both defenses looked like they had it together. They were schemed right. They knew each other. They were playing defensive. Um, I almost liken it back to when the Ravens won the Super Bowl. What was it, 506? Where their defense won them that championship.
Like I don't remember that.
I'm just my point is though that like their offense was pretty subpar, but their defense won them that Super Bowl because their defense was that good. We've been talking about the Jets for a while.
With what, the Broncos with Von Miller and Peyton Manning, like their offense wasn't good, but it was just Von Miller carrying that team.
Exactly. I think that both of these teams have winning records. If the playoffs started today, they'd both be in the playoffs. And I think that any offense running into either one of these teams should be scared of how well both of those teams just played defense.
Yeah.
My other takeaway is to talk about Zach Wilson. As we're recording this on Wednesday, the Jets front office informed the team that Zach Wilson is not going to be starting next week.
Correct.
I know I've given Zach Wilson a little more credit than most. I'm not here to say that he's a really great quarterback. However, the dude is 5-2 this season. His only 2 losses came to New England, and Bill Belichick's special is always taking away the offense's weapon, and it appears that he's done that twice to the Jets. Do you believe that it's time for Zach Wilson to be benched for a 40-year-old Joe
Flacco? They're actually not going with Flacco. They're going with White, which is what I just heard like 20 minutes ago. That's what they told. Like that's what I just saw in a report from Bleacher Report. So they're going with White, which I actually think is the better call. I think it's better. We've seen White before, and like for the most part, I thought he actually played pretty well. Again, like it's the Jets, so back then, like a year ago, the Jets weren't good. So like you saw him start to kind of shine a little bit without Zach Wilson there. So again, like I think that's actually the right move. Again, I don't like Zach Wilson. I like again, he might be 5-2, but it's still the Jets and it's still Zach Wilson.
Look, White obviously had a couple good games last year. If I'm not mistaken, he also won an Offensive Player of the Week last season in one of his 2. I'm not here to take it away from him. It's also hard for me to justify giving him the starting job to replace a quarterback who's 5-2 with no injury. I know that Zach Wilson's numbers this week were awful, but New England's defense is pretty good, especially when it's Belichick against a division opponent. The Patriots have done this for 20 years. Like I think it's very strange that at this point in time is when you're making that decision that Wilson shouldn't be.
Well, I mean, what was the stats? Zach Wilson had what in the second half? 9 yards.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all you need right there. That's all you need, Ted. The second half alone. That's 30 minutes of just 9 yards.
Look, the guy had 77.
There's no other argument, Ted. It's just that number. That's it.
I get it. I get why the fan base is angry, right? But if you listen to the fan base, the Eagles might still be trotting out fucking Donovan McNabb because he took us to a Super Bowl once, and that dude's what, 50-something now? Like, look, I get why there's reason to look at that game and be disappointed, right? But the week before the Patriots was a bye week. Before that, he beat the Bills, 72% completion. I'm looking at it now. The week before against the Patriots, I know he lost, but he still had 2 touchdowns and 355 yards. I get that his yardage isn't great. I understand that like he may not be the greatest quarterback ever, but he's completing most of his passes. He's winning games. Like he doesn't look terrible. I also recognize that a lot of his stats look down, especially yardage from. They've been relying on their run game and their defense, where they don't need to throw the ball a whole lot. I don't understand benching Zach Wilson, putting up wins, doing what he needs to be doing. It just doesn't feel like the right time for me after a bad week.
Well, okay. I can kind of see your point, but at the same time, I don't think Zach Wilson's a leader. Like, for example, this past week, right, against the Patriots, in that press interview, if you watched it, when asked if he had any like responsibility, any problem, like if he was anything, he said no. right? But like you watch the same thing from Josh Allen losing last week or 2 weeks ago, and he said, I got to tighten up. I have to do this. Like he put all these eyes. He's like an actual leader. So Zach Wilson just like going around being like, I'm not the problem. Like I think says something to the team as well. Like he's not a leader to them. Like if he was a leader, I think most leaders would be like, you know what, this is on me. Like the 77 yards I put up in a whole game, let alone the 9 yards I put into one half, is 100% on me. Like he's the one making the throws. He's the yes, the play calling may not be just throwing all the time, but again, he could change that if he threw a little bit better. Like the Jets would be more comfortable throwing all the time.
That one I'll give you. I can't argue that, but I also understand that like he could be frustrated after the game because they lost. The game was tied 3-3 for about 4 hours. And the reason that they lost it was a punt return for 87 yards, right? Like that was the difference in that game. He wasn't on the field. He couldn't control the Patriots. Like the defense did their jobs. Maybe the offense didn't, but it kept them in that game still at 3-3. And special teams lost in that game. I understand being frustrated and not wanting to take responsibility. And too, I don't want to say that his press conference is what got him benched. I get you want him to be a leader, but also like he can't just be like, "Yep, that was all my fault that the punter punted it to the guy and our special teams couldn't tackle him." Like I understand his frustration.
Okay, agreed. I can see the frustration, but it's not even just like you don't have to accept the whole thing. Like, just say some of it was the problem. Like, you only threw 77 yards. You only had 9 yards in the second half alone. Like, just those numbers are absurd. Like, to have a starting position in the NFL, like, bro, pay me 28 million. I'll throw for 77 yards. I don't care. Like, what is that? Like, I'll take the 28 million.
Yeah,
and I'll accept all of the blame. I'll be like, yeah, all on me. Yep. Like, this doesn't. I don't think he's a leader, and I think the Jets are starting to see that. And this might, like, maybe they'll go back to. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve a starting position. He doesn't deserve a second chance to prove that he's worthy of being a starter. But again, I just don't think he's the leader that the Jets need.
I'm not even opposed to benching him, right? Like I get it, but also this just feels like not the right time. But I guess we'll see how it works out for the Jets in the coming weeks.
Listen, if the Jets are ever going to listen, pay me $20 million. I will gladly throw 77 here.
Man, I would take Wilson's contract. I think he's still in a rookie deal, so it's even less than that. I think I'd take that to throw a football for the Jets.
For 77 yards, yes.
The other game we wanted to talk about a little bit is the Lions and the Giants. I expected this to be a better game, but I didn't get to watch a ton of it just because I was relying on cable. Didn't up until literally today on my coffee table. What I know you wanted to talk about it, Noah. What did you see from the Lions and the Giants that you?
I mean, we've talked a lot about the Lions and the Giants on this podcast. Again, we've said multiple times the Lions aren't a free win. They put up fights. Like, we've seen that before. And we've raved recently, especially about the Giants defense. Again, something they can take pride in. And you got me to freaking say they were good, man. Every time I say the Giants are good, they lose. So all I'm saying is the Lions, they played really well. Again, not the game I expected to see from the Giants. Again, like, I expected their defense to really show up. It kind of felt like they didn't. Again, just the 12 in the fourth kind of felt like garbage points at some point. I feel like this game was a lot like the score wasn't like reflective of the actual game. I think the Lions kind of walked all over the Giants. Again, not what I expected. But yeah, go Lions, man. Come on.
Genuinely, just looking at the highlights that I did see, I mean, the Lions looked like they had it together on offense, which is nice. I'm glad they're mostly back to that form, although we'll get to in a second why that's a dangerous thing to say here. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the Giants' defense has been their stalwart like all season long, and it just didn't feel like it was there. The Giants just never felt like a solid unit on defense. It was a very bizarre thing to watch. The reason I say that, giving somebody credit and saying they're back brings up the 49ers and the Cardinals, especially in the NFC West, but all over the league, all season long. Every time we say that a team is back, they shit the bed. Um, the 49ers looked really, really good in this game. Their offense looked really, really solid. They had a game plan. Everything was working for them. But we gave the Cardinals credit the week before for, hey, look, they look like they're back to form. They're playing really well. They're solid here. They've put together a couple of good weeks. And then they shit the bed. Just stop saying that people are back, and we just need to start saying this is a one-game flash in the pan. Because, man, I hate putting it on them that they're going to lose it every time we give it to them.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've seen the Niners ever since they traded for McCaffrey. They've looked absolutely unstoppable at times, and other times they just look super dead. And again, we've seen the same from the Cardinals ever since Hop returned. They've been really good at times, but then they've also been really abysmal. So including this game, like they didn't show up at all. I felt like. And again, like I would love to say that the Niners are back. Maybe they can make some noise, but again, we got to watch that because every time you say the Niners or the Cardinals, I feel like it's just those two teams though. They just lose the next week. So I would love to see the Niners in the playoffs. They're a really good team. I think they make a great matchup for either the Chiefs or the Bills, and I would love to see that game. But again, like we can't just say that they're back.
Yeah, I want to kind of like reflect that to what we said about the Vikings and genuinely the Cowboys earlier too. That like one game looking this good is a really great thing. Happy to take your win, move on to next week. But also, if I can't trust you to do that week in, week out, can I trust you in the playoffs to make a deep run? Like, yes, both of these teams have the talent, have the skill, and have put together weeks that make the fan bases hopeful that, like, hey, this could be our Super Bowl year, right? But I feel like they have to do it with enough consistency, and we just haven't seen it from either one of them all season long.
Agreed. Even after the trade to McCaffrey, we just haven't seen like the Niners have put up some decent wins. It's just not been consistent. And the Cardinals, again, they're probably the most inconsistent team here. It's been interesting to watch though.
Yeah, and maybe we can determine that it's not necessarily the Call of Duty release, but maybe it took Warzone for Kyler Murray to fall down a little bit. Anyway, last thing we've got on this list, as far as games and covering the last 2 weeks goes, is maybe just some bigger talking points for the 2 weeks as a whole, instead of breaking it down to what we saw at the time and trying to think back to how we felt 2 weeks ago. Similarly, for the NFC and the AFC, the leaders that we had talked about 2 weeks ago have had some struggles since the last time we got on this. I'll start with the Eagles. The big struggles, obviously, losing their first game. They did not necessarily put up a great win against the Colts. So, how do we feel about the Eagles? Are we worried about them? It's a 2-game lead in the entire conference. Well, I guess 1 game over the Vikings, 2 games in their division. How do we feel about their safety, their security? We still feel as confidently about them as we did 2 weeks.
I would still put them as a possible contender in the NFC. Obviously, again, they're still technically the top team, and we've seen them again. This win this past week, just by 1 point, was not ideal, especially against a struggling team already. And again, losing to the Commanders is just alone the Commanders part is pretty bad. But again, I'm not too concerned. I think that again, they're kind of just they can play free now, and I think that the pressure is actually going to be so off that they can just be themselves. And I think it's actually going to be kind of scary. We're going to realize that they're like unlocking something else somewhere.
Yeah, my concern for them was that if they were playing run defense, they were good against the run. If they were playing pass defense, they were good against the pass. But I guess being fooled on defense was starting to look like a struggle. I hope that both the signings of Ndamukong Suh and God, I forget the other guy's name. Regardless, I hope that kind of helps that secure up that defensive line. That maybe they can be more effective on a run defense when they up for a pass defense. But I think that we've got some things left to be seen for the Eagles to work out before.
Well, again, agreed. No team is perfect, but definitely to pick up with Suh. Again, we've seen like Suh's like really fucking good actually. So like that's not like a just toss away pickup. Like that's a really good pickup for them. I'll be surprised and excited to see how their defense looks.
Yeah, admittedly, he didn't play great against the Colts, but it was also on 4 days' notice. It wasn't a whole lot of time to be prepared. So I'm hoping that does improve that offense. or that defense rather, and maybe gets the Eagles back to where we saw them beating up on better teams rather than. Um, Similarly, when we talked about division standings a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned that the Bills had the first overall seed at the time, but it was going to be harder for them to secure based on their schedule. Um, are we worried about the Bills if we've watched them lose 2 weeks out of, well, not the last 2 weeks, but weeks 9 and 10? Um, are we worried about the Bills?
Um, Again, I think I'm more worried not about the team. I know the team is like fucking top tier. I think I'm more worried about Josh Allen. Like those weeks 9 and 10, like again, those 4 red zone interceptions are something like we haven't seen from Josh Allen in a very long time. So yeah, I'm concerned. Again, seeing them play, better this week was ideal. But again, that's kind of something that needs to be short. I don't think that the Bills as a team should be worried, but I think like if I was Josh Allen, I'd be a little worried about how I've been performing.
Well, I guess my issue with the Bills is that their their path to a Super Bowl gets a whole lot harder with that one extra game. You know, at this point, it looks like it's going to be difficult for them to catch the Chiefs to get that first round bye unless the Chiefs absolutely. But I'm still confident in the Bills that I know they're a better team than anybody else who steps foot on the football. Right? If they played a 3 or 5 game series like other sports do, I would take the Bills 100% of the time. Any opponent doesn't matter. I'd take the Bills. But I guess in these 1 game samples where they've lost to the Jets, they've thrown it away to the Vikings. Like I don't know. I don't feel as confidently about them as I did a couple of weeks ago. Like I said, I still know they're the best team on. I can know it, but I guess I trust them less, and I kind of worry about their chances later on in the season if they keep having these kind of scuffed 1 game samples.
Yeah, I mean, again, every team is entitled to bad weeks. I'm not saying that, like Buffalo has 100% not been the same team we've seen through the first few games. I, as a loyal Buffalo fan, I have to be not as concerned. So simple as that.
Oh, fair enough. I do want to get into some standings and where things sit now because a lot of stuff has shifted over the past couple of weeks since the last time we got on the podcast. So I just kind of want to briefly go over teams that are in the lead for the divisions and see what we kind of think about their chances moving. We'll start in the AFC. In the East, if the playoffs started today, all 4 teams would make the playoffs. However, with the Bills losing a couple of games and Miami kind of turning it back on with Tua being healthy and active now, what do you think about the Dolphins' chances for the AFC, their ability to?
Again, I know that technically the Dolphins actually have the tiebreaker over the Bills, but I still think in that division, the road to the playoffs goes through Buffalo. Even though Miami right now is feeling like they're good, they're getting there. Again, we haven't seen the Bills. We've seen the Bills kind of stumble. I still think the Bills have this. Even if they both win out, I mean, obviously then Miami would win, but I don't see that happening. I think that there's a better chance of Buffalo winning the majority of their games than Miami winning the majority of their games.
It's weird because for me, in a playoff circumstance, I think a lot of their game comes down to home field advantage, right? I mean, we watched the Bills lose in Miami earlier this season because it was 130 degrees on their side. Like Josh Allen's last pass, he had a limp arm because he'd thrown the ball 60 times in 95 degrees. We also saw Buffalo had to move their game out of Buffalo because of 7 feet of snow in Orchard Park, right? So, like, you say that the road to the Super Bowl goes through Buffalo. While that team has to beat Buffalo for sure, I don't know that the road goes through Buffalo if Buffalo ends up as a wild card team instead of a division winner that's going to get a home game or two. I really think that a lot of that division is going to be determined by what happens with Miami's game against Buffalo later this season. I mean, I think the winner of that game should be considered a favorite for the AFC, if not second behind the Chiefs. But I really think that home field is going to come down to a lot of what makes that division relevant in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. Again, we're Buffalo, 7 feet of snow versus 95 degrees. Definitely a little bit different. So, I mean, again, I agree, but I don't. Even then, we saw a really good game between Buffalo and Miami in general. So like either way, I think it's going to be a really good game. But I still have the confidence that I know the Josh Allen of old, of the past few games of the season. Um, I think that the Bills in general could just walk into any stadium. It might be hard, especially 95 7 feet of snow. But I think that they're still the better team, like you said. I still think they could easily walk into anywhere and kind of just cook up.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to see how that division ends. I mean, that's one of the tighter ones, genuinely. That if the season plays out the right way, any one of those four teams could. So I'm definitely keeping my eye on the AFC.
Well, I mean, like just alone, like you have both Miami and Buffalo are 7-3, and then both the Patriots and Jets are actually 6-4. So even that one game difference there is like even if someone just slips one time, like you really could have a different playoff picture. So
Yeah,
that'll be interesting.
and all of them pose really real threats in the playoffs. Like I say, if the playoffs started today, all four of those teams make the play. The AFC East would have all three of the wild cards. Um, which I don't think that you can be super confident as any team playing any one of them. That it's a super interesting division.
Yeah.
Moving to the AFC West, with the stuff that's happened the past 2 weeks, the Chiefs currently have a 1-game lead on the AFC. They would have the bye. They're leading their division. However, um, I don't know how realistic it is that the Chiefs give that 1-game bye up in the playoffs if they continue playing the way that they have. The rest of their schedule includes the Rams, the Bengals, the Broncos, the Texans, the Seahawks, the Broncos again, and then the Raiders. All of those teams have losing records. They get the Broncos twice, which is kind of nice. Excuse me, the Seahawks don't have a losing record. They would be the only formidable team on that list, and I still think that they're the things that the Seahawks do well, the Chiefs do even better. Do you see there being any possibility that the Chiefs up that bound?
Again, as much as I would love to say yes, I could see it, I don't think it's realistic. I think again the Chiefs have like a super easy schedule, and even before going into this, like before these past 11 weeks, like we thought the Seahawks would be like terrible. So even though the Seahawks are like on the schedule back then, we probably were like, oh, this is just like it's wraps, right? Like the Chiefs just could win out. Um, Again, it's a little different. We know the Seahawks can put up points, but again, there's no real challenge on that remaining list. Again, I would, if they had played anyone else, Bills, Dolphins, like I would love to see that. And I think that would be the only teams that could really make them kind of falter. So I don't think realistically, unless somehow, we see the Russell Wilson of old come back for 2 games and beat the Chiefs single handedly, that would be great. Please, Russell Wilson, you can do it. But I don't think it's realistic.
Yeah, I know it. Like I've said it a million times. I'll say it a million more. Winning division games is hard. While they are definitely better teams than the Broncos and the Raiders, like those are going to be 3 competitive games just because they're in the same. Watch the Chiefs and the Chargers have an absolute hell of a game the other night, just because they're in the same division. Even though I know the Chiefs. So I'm not saying that it's impossible for the Chiefs to lose it, but it's starting to look more and more likely that they're going to get that bye, have an easier, home field advantage through the AFC.
Right. I mean, again, like if they had even gotten the Chargers again this past week, it was a great game. I would have loved to see that, and I think the Chargers probably would have been the next closest to like be able in that division to really be able to make them lose a game. But
Yeah, like I said,
Broncos.
we'll see what happens. But it's starting to look more and more likely that the Chiefs are going to. In the AFC North, the Bengals are only a game behind the Ravens. I know the Ravens didn't put up a super impressive performance last week. Bengals just kind of look more and more put together each and every week. Again, I hesitate that because I know what happens when we do. But how do you see that division playing out? It's basically a 2-team race at this point. Where do you see things ending up?
Agreed. Obviously, the Bengals are probably one of the 2 best teams in that division. I do think the Ravens are better than them right now. Again, like this past week, yes, the Bengals scored a lot, but again, it was also against the Steelers, and somehow the Steelers put up 30 points. So there's definitely some things to address on the Bengals before we see them come back to a Super Bowl. I don't think they're better than the Ravens right now. Um, so right now, realistically, I think the Ravens would probably be able to win that division. Again, a game is not that much, but I expect the Bengals to falter, and I expect the Ravens to falter as well. But I expect the Ravens to falter less.
Um, Last division in the AFC is the South. It's starting to look like the Titans are going to win that division. I mean, they've currently got a 3-game lead. Um, Colts being below 500, Jaguars and the Texans both just not living up to anything close to competitive. Titans are starting to look like they've got everything mostly on track compared to last season. Not as good as last season, but closer to being on that track. Um, what do you see rather than who can catch the Titans? Maybe how do you see the Titans being a lock for this division? How do you see that impacting their seeding or competitiveness through the?
Um, I think the Titans are 100% a lock to win. I like these teams are terrible. Even the Titans, like I would say they're terrible. If talking to someone, like yes, they put together good games, but like they're terrible, and so is the division. And again, I know Derrick Henry, like great player, and I know the team has the talent, but I just haven't seen the same team. But again, even just they've just been so much better than the rest of their division, which is saying something because the rest of the division is just terrible. Um, Again, I would 100% lock the Titans, and I think they're 100% going to wild card, and we're going to see them in the playoffs. Again, mentality wise, though, I don't really know. Like again, we haven't seen a strength test for the Titans really. So
They do
again,
get the Eagles in a couple of weeks, so maybe we can get a judgment as to how well they're playing against better teams. But I guess my most interesting matchup for them would be if they manage to catch the Ravens. Currently, they've got the same record, but I think the Ravens have a tougher schedule. I think the Ravens have looked better as a whole, but I also know the Titans are tough as shit. Again, not a free win. 7-3 is nothing to scoff at, even if it's a pretty weak 7-3. Like I think that's where I'm interested in seeing. All hoping that we can get a matchup later on in the season. Moving to the NFC, I'm going to start with the Vikings in the NFC North. They're in a pretty similar circumstance. They're all but locked. If I'm not mistaken, let me double check here. They have a 4-game lead for the Lions, second place. You can pretty much safely assume. I think their magic number is like if the Vikings win and the Lions lose, I think that them in the playoffs like as a guarantee. Um, we've kind of talked already about our feelings on the Vikings just based on their performances over the last 2 games, so I'm not going to harp this too hard. Moving then to the NFC East, Eagles currently have a 2-game lead, which I recognize the Eagles have been down the past 2 weeks over what they had done at the beginning of the season, but in that division with some of those teams playing as well as they have been, 2 games is pretty significant.
yeah, agreed. We're going to kind of find out a little bit more on Thursday when the Cowboys meet the Giants um, to kind of see kind of who would be the bigger contender. Again, I think out of those four to the Eagles, like I think that the Cowboys or Giants would be the next real, threat to them. So again, we'll kind of see. I do expect the Eagles to kind of win out, or not win out, but be able to kind of hold on to this lead. Again, you're allowed to falter twice, and I expect the Cowboys and Giants to also falter. So there's a lot more leeway there. Um, I mean, again, unless the Cowboys or Giants go on another 6-game winning streak, then you got something to be concerned about. But again, like I said before, like I expect these 3 teams to kind of falter at some point, but I trust that the Eagles will falter less.
Yeah. I think the interesting part of that division is just the schedule that's upcoming. I mean, you mentioned that tomorrow the Cowboys and Giants will play each other, which I think is puts a good grip as one of them being better in the division. But the Eagles, even with that 2-game lead, they still have to play the Cowboys once. Still have the Giants twice. Like losing one of those games not only sets you back that 1-game buffer, but it also means that like if the Eagles and Giants and the Cowboys all lost on the same week, right? The Eagles keep that 2-game lead. If the Giants or the Cowboys beats the Eagles, you automatically shrink that to 1 game, and I think it makes that division just so much easier to catch. Um,
Agree.
I I have to believe, looking at the rest of this, especially with what we saw out of the Vikings last week, that the winner of this division has to be the one that gets the bye. Especially because the Eagles and Cowboys have already beat the Vikings out high. They would get the tiebreaker for home field advantage. But I have to imagine that whoever wins that division has a pretty good hold on, home field advantage and winning out, or having the easiest path anyway through the playoffs. So I think that's another interesting one to keep our eyes on. We're gonna move out west, mostly because I just don't want to talk about the South. We're gonna get there, but out west, this one is basically coming down to the 49ers versus. We mentioned that the 49ers just can't do anything consistent. I know they've got a really good roster and have the ability to really, really, really good football. They just can't seem to put it together week in and week out. The Seahawks have a very explosive offense that I think makes them super interesting. How do you see this division playing out, given what you've got left, and knowing that the Seahawks also have one game against the 49ers with a head-to-head?
Again, we've seen this exact scenario where we had the Seahawks versus Niners, and they were both like fighting for a top spot. And again, like we saw, this was back when Russell Wilson was on the Seahawks. Again, we saw it come down to that game. So I think that is going to say a lot to how that division shakes up. Again, we have to wait a little bit to kind of see it. But again, I expect both of these teams to kind of. I can't say that both of them are back or are good, because then they're just gonna fucking fail. Like again, going into this season, I think we both agreed we thought it'd be Rams, Cardinals, Niners, Seahawks, and now here we are talking, and it's like Niners, Seahawks, and then Cardinals and the Rams, who were literally just won a Super Bowl, and it's just kind of crazy to talk. But yeah, I expect that division will come down to that game.
Yeah, similar for me to the AFC East. I mean, I really think that head-to-head matchup makes all the difference. Like, I trust them both to win or lose on any given week. Neither one of them is super consistent, super dominant, right? I think that whoever wins that head-to-head game kind of has to cement themselves as the favorite to win. When they play on the 15th, I feel like whoever wins that game is the new favorite for the division, and it's theirs to lose.
Yeah.
Last division, I hate that we're getting here, but got to talk about the NFC South. We did the other 7, right? So currently the Bucs own the division lead at 5-5. The only reason that they're winning that division is because the Falcons are 5-6. They've played one extra game and haven't gotten their bye week yet. This division just fucking bull. The Saints are at 4-7. They're only a game and a half behind. The Panthers are at 3-8, so they're 2.5 behind. No one's out of this division, but everyone's playing like shit. How do you see this division playing out? How are we readjusting, knowing that everyone in this division's fucking?
All right. First of all, for those who listen to this, the way Ted is talking about the NFC South, okay, the AFC South is worse. So make that very clear, okay?
The AFC South is worse, but they have the Titans, so it doesn't look as bad. That's fair.
Correct. They're still bad. Again, the Bucs are literally 5-5, and they own the division lead. I don't really know. I don't even the Bucs. You're right. Like they're just every team in that division is trying. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Well, so is the AFC, so it's fine. But I don't know.
I vowed several weeks ago to not watch this division again for the rest of the season. I would rather not watch football than see a game that happens in the NFC South, right? For me, at least, like I can't even give you a favorite, right? Like I think the Falcons, as an overall whole, have been playing better than the Bucs, and they just have the deficit of having that one extra loss because they haven't hit their like. Obviously, like, hey, in a one-game sample size, you pick a quarterback all time, like Brady is going to be that guy for a lot of people, so you can't always not trust them. But like, I genuinely, like, instead of giving an opinion, I just kind of want to tell you I don't fucking care. They'd lose to any one of these other division winners. They'd lose to anybody in the NFC East who's going to know the wild card. That's like, who gives a fuck? It doesn't matter who wins this division. They're all shit.
Yeah, agreed. I think technically, I think that I would put the Falcons above the Bucs. Again, I think they're playing better. but it's just it's a trash can division. Simple as that.
I hate that we even had to bring him up. I promise I'll try my hardest not to do it again. I guess that moves us on from all of our stuff that we've done covering the past 2 weeks, which naturally pulls into fantasy. I would just like the very subtle flex of saying that I've barely adjusted my rosters. You're one of my leagues, and I still won both leagues, both weeks, over the last 2 weeks, and we're going to leave it alone at that. But no, I'm pretty much going to let you take the floor here because I have no idea what's been going on.
To be honest, neither have I. I've been working. um, Honestly, I've just seen a lot from backups for the Raiders. So obviously, we missed Darren Waller, and even having Matt Collins, wide receiver. I picked him up. Great addition. Again, like we haven't really seen. I think the Raiders are kind of expanding their options, kind of seeing what other talent they have on their team. So again, I'm kind of like interested to see how that is. But again, like I haven't really like been too much into it because of work. But again, all I want to say is my kicker got me 23 points, and that was great. The only problem was I was on our bye week, so I didn't play anyone, and I would have had a higher score than everyone else in the league, and would have been great. But I didn't play anyone, so I guess I had to deal with that.
Oh, fair enough. That's the joys of having an odd team league. I would just also like to point out that I noticed this week, while not adjusting my roster, that we have in our ESPN league we've got 2 divisions. So one of those divisions has 8 teams. The other one has. It's not even like we split them. I have no idea what the fuck is happening. So be it. Anyway, I guess the big difficult point for fantasy at this point in time in the year is just coasting out the last few bye weeks that we still have to go. But also, like we're at the point like injuries mount up every season. No surprise if you've ever watched football before, that you get the more deeper you have to go into your roster. I just want to bring up the value again in dropping your second kicker, second defense if you've got them on your bench. Pick up more skill position guys like receivers or running backs. Fill out your roster when guys do get injured. When the last few of your guys are on bye, you're not going to need that second defense again. Up on the skill position, man. Like, go find value in your leagues. Pick up the top couple of guys. I forget the kid's name from Green Bay. Had a good couple of weeks. He had 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys. Dude I've never fucking heard of before, which is why I can't remember his name. Like, there's value if you go looking for it later
Christian.
on in the season. That's it. Yeah, Christian.
My God, what is, bro? I'm picking him up right now. Hold on.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's value in it. You know what I mean? Go look, make your roster deeper, pick up the skill positions rather than keeping that second kicker case. Because I promise, at this point in the season, nobody's picking up a fuck. Nobody gets injured. Get him right back if you're. Go find the value.
You're gonna hate playing me now. You shouldn't have. You shouldn't have told me that.
Look at that. I'm finding value for Noah. Oh. All right. That moves us naturally from fantasy to our last segment. I want to get into some gambling. So week 10, Noah went 8-6. I went 6-8. Week 11, obviously we did it on the podcast last week. Both of us put our picks on Twitter. If you don't follow us there, that's where you can check it out. It's something good and Scuffed happens. Noah learned how spreads work again. We talk about it. Both of us went 6-6-1 because we missed the Thursday night game. I think we did it on Friday morning. But
no one cares about Thursday games, anyways.
They've all been pretty fucking terrible. You just do them because you got it. But that brings Noah to a total of 68, 92-3, and took me to 73, 87-3. As those numbers every time I have to change that loss column up another tens place, I feel fucking awful. It's the worst. There's only a few weeks left. We're more than halfway through the season, so only a few weeks left for both of us to get back to 500. And I hope this week we do it. But there's some goofy ass, big fucking spreads. I'm terrified. Not going to be my week, I promise. Don't take my game. Put it out there now. We're going to start with the Bills and the Lions. Bills are 9.5 favorites on the road.
I've done it every single time, and we're going to keep doing it. I trust the Bills 100%. We just watched them play a decent game, also in Detroit, so they're just staying where they are. And again, the Lions, yes, they beat the Giants, but I don't think the Giants defense is the same as the Bills defense, and I think that's a different league. And I expect the Bills to win by more than 10 points, please.
This one really hurts. I trust the Bills to be 10 points better than the Lions, but I also said the Lions offense be really good. I know that even though the Bills won last week, they didn't look the most fantastic ever, and they lost 2 weeks before that. If we're following trends, Lions feel like the natural choice. But on Thanksgiving, Lions always fucking shit the bed. As much as it's against my better judgment with a giant fucking spread and all the data pointing that you should take the fucking Lions at home, I'm going to take the Bills. And I hate it. And just so you know, the Lions are going to lose by 9 now. Not by 10. They're going to lose by 9, so they still cover. I'm telling you right now, it's going to happen.
We'll see.
Second Thursday game, because it's fucking Thanksgiving tomorrow. We got the Giants and the Cowboys. Cowboys are 10-point favorites at home.
I have no idea how that one works. Again, I don't think. Yes, I think the offense against the Vikings was great. I still don't. I've only seen it one time in the past years, many years. So again, I'm not gonna. I think the Giants keep this within 10. And that's my pick.
If you had asked me this last week, same spread, I would 100% go Giants. No thoughts, no questions asked. However, the way that the scheme worked for the Cowboys, the way that their offense looked so put together, so well designed, the play calling was immaculate, everybody got involved. I'm going against my better judgment again, where I tell you, always take the fucking underdogs on the big spread. I'm taking the goddamn Cowboys, and I hate it. So again, the Cowboys are going to win by 9. You can mark it. I'm telling you, all of these big spreads.
I'm telling you, man. You've been raving about the Giants defense. I expect them to show up against the Cowboys.
I have. But if the Lions offense can make Giants defense look that pedestrian, and the Cowboys offense looked that well organized, on paper, man, that's an easy one at 10. I just hate big spreads. The Cowboys are going to win by 9. I'm still taking the Cowboys, but I'm telling you, I'm going to be wrong by a singular point to just smear it in my face, man. Third Thursday game, I got Patriots Vikings. The Vikings are 2.5 favorites at home.
I think this one's pretty easy. I think I expect the Vikings to win this by more than 2.5.
This only becomes hard because we saw what we saw out of the Vikings last week. But I'm with you. I'm taking the Vikings. 2.5 feels like a pretty low spread. I don't think the Patriots are that good, and I think the Vikings are Thursday night. Moving into Sunday games, Ravens Jags. Ravens are 4-point favorites on the road.
Pretty easy. Ravens, yeah.
I'm with you. I'm happy. We finally got one easy one after 3 that I am struggling really fucking hard with. Ravens at least by 5. Broncos Panthers. Broncos are 2.5 favorites on the road. Yeah, I'm with you. When the Broncos win, I had read a stat that before last week, the Broncos would have a 1-loss record if their average points per game was 18. If they had scored 18 points in a game, they would only have 1. The issue with that is that if they're not scoring 18 points, it becomes hard to win football games. Trusting that they can hold a Jags offense to 13 if they're only going to score 17 to get the push, not even the win, the push, is hard for me to have faith in because I think most NFL teams can score more than 13 on any given week. I think I'm going to take the Panthers only because they're given points.
Yeah, I mean, again, we just haven't seen the Broncos be the Broncos we thought. And again, even after the trade of Christian McCaffrey, the Panthers put up some decent games. So I'm going to go with the Panthers as well, yeah.
I have Falcons at Washington. The Commanders are 4-point favorites at home.
I don't know.
Listen, I trust the Green Lizard, man. Give me Washington. Let's do it.
All right. That was a weird statement.
Look, Taylor Heineke should have been starting the season. Wentz should have been riding the bench all year long. I trust Taylor Heineke. I think he's not only the better quarterback there, but I think he's got something to prove. I don't think the Falcons are that good. I know they can score, but Washington at home with Taylor Heineke, I'm taking Washington.
Normally, I would say the Falcons starting again. I watched Heineke throw some absolute dimes. So I agree. I'm going to go Washington, but I don't like it.
That's fair. I have the Bucks at the Browns. Bucks are 3.5 favorites. I don't know that I have watched a single second of Cleveland Browns football this season.
Yeah, me either.
I really don't.
I guess last week technically, but
I just gonna say, you as a Bills fan, you would have seen last week. But beyond, I don't know that I've seen a single second of Bucs football or Browns football. Excuse me. Normally, you at least catch highlights or something. And the fact that I haven't even seen them on highlights unless I've gone looking for them means that they're incredibly fun. I'm gonna take the Bucs against my better judgment. But like I said, if the Browns are just that boring and the Bucs at least have something to show me, I'm gonna take the Bucs.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the Browns don't have Deshaun Watson back yet, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say this will be their last game without him, which I think is gonna change some spreads. But yeah, as long as they don't have him, give me the Bucs.
Yeah.
Bengals Titans. Bengals are 2.5 favorites on the road. This one's tough.
Why? We talked about it. The AFC is trash too. Trash too. They might be 7-3, but they're still trash. I'm going Bengals, 100%.
All right. Just because of your vigor, I'm gonna fade you, and I'm gonna take the Titans. I think home dogs are always a pretty good bet. And I think the Titans pose a more physical, slow-paced threat than the Bengals have played in a while. I think it should be a good football game, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals did win. But I have enough of a seed of a doubt that I think the Titans could possibly pull this off.
Would it change your mind if you knew that, like, Jamar Chase was coming back this week?
I know Jamar Chase is coming back this week.
I just want to make sure you knew.
He's on my roster.
Because Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are just fucking amazing teammates.
Look, like I said, if I had to pick this game straight up, like pick me a winner, I'm taking the Bengals. But because you get the spread, like I think the benefit to the Bengals offense is that they're really fast paced. They throw the ball really deep. They have a really explosive offense. If the Titans are running the ball more often than not, they're slowing the pace way down. That the Bengals have less opportunity. That I could see the Titans competing here. I'm gonna take Tennessee and fade you. We got to get different records somehow, right? I gotta make that time up to 500, right?
Yeah.
All right. Texans at the Dolphins. Texans at the Dolphins. Dolphins are 13.5 favorites at home.
I've done it before. I'll do it again. Dolphins all the way, but I know you're gonna hate this one.
I do. It's a big spread, and I fucking hate it. I think I'm taking Texans solely because it's 13.5. I think that's it for me. That's the only decision making I'm making there. 13.5 is fucking huge. I can't do it. I'm taking the Texans.
There was a game that was 13.5 for the Bills, and they covered. So I mean, I just want to point out
they also had a 13.5 against the Jets, and they lost outright. So,
well, we're not talking about that. That's
all right. And for what it's worth, the Eagles were 13 favorites over the Texans, and the Texans only lost by 12. So, the Texans can cover 13.5. You did, but we're going to move on. I'm taking the Texans just because of the spread. I have Bears Jets. Jets are 6-point favorites at home.
I don't know about you. I still hate the Jets, so Bears, 100%.
Yeah, Bears offense has been really good for the past 3 or 4 weeks. The Jets switching quarterbacks on a Tuesday, fucking no. I'm taking the Bears. I think the Bears win outright, not just to cover. I have Raiders Seahawks. Seahawks are 3.5 favorites at home. I'm taking the Seahawks. I think the Raiders, especially Derek Carr, have looked better over the past couple of weeks. But at the end of the day, they're still the Raiders. Their rosters and don't seem to be able to put together wins. Seahawks are super 3.5 feels like an easy cover.
Agreed. Sorry, I saw the spread for the Rams and Chiefs. We'll get to that. Oh, what the hell? Again, I'll take the Seahawks.
No looking too far ahead. I have Chargers Cardinals. Chargers are 3-point favorites on the road. I'm struggling only because the Cardinals are up and down. They win a week, they lose a week. They win a week, they lose a week. Lost, which case for a win. I don't think the Chargers are that good, which tells me I should be picking the Cardinals. But I've been bucking my whole trend all day long. I'm going to take the Chargers.
I will say, to defend you from any slander oncoming, they did just play a really good game against the Chiefs. That being said, it's at home. I'm hoping Kyler comes back, so I'm going Cardinals here.
Now we're getting to the big one. Rams Chiefs. Chiefs are 15.5 favorites at home.
This is the only time I'm gonna not go with the big spread. This entire podcast, I've always gone big spread. I'm gonna go Rams here because I think that, again, the Rams defense, if they actually show up, they can do something to the Chiefs.
Oh, this is the bigger the spread gets, the harder it fucking gets, man. I hate this so fucking much. Do as I say, not as I do, because I'm taking the Chiefs. I hate myself for it. And again, the Chiefs are going to win by 15 and not 15.5, and I'm going to lose another big spread on half a fucking point. I can tell you right now. But Chiefs would look better and better and better and better and better every single week. Rams continue to look worse and worse and worse and continue to. I truly and wholeheartedly believe that they easily win this game by 21, but football happens and I'm going to lose to the spread, not the game. I'm telling you right now. I am taking the Chiefs, but I hate taking
them. Yeah, I just want to make clear, I don't think the Rams will beat the Chiefs. They'll keep it within 15.
All right, I've got the Saints at the 49ers. The 49ers are 8.5. This spread is at such a good spot, right? Because if it were any smaller, I'd be like, 49ers easy. If it were any bigger, I'd be like, Saints easy. But they picked the perfect fucking spot where I've got no goddamn idea. I'm gonna take the Saints just because it's 8.5. Like, the 49ers winning by a touchdown feels like a realistic outcome, and that gives it to the Saints plus 8.5. Right? I'm gonna take the Saints just because I really don't.
I'm gonna go Niners here. Again, I know the Saints have the ability to keep. And I know the Niners are gonna fucking face plant.
All right. Sunday night, I've got the Packers at the Eagles. Eagles are 6.5 favorites.
I feel like I agree with that. Yeah, I'd pick the Eagles.
I'm gonna take the Eagles. Mostly because the Eagles, like I said earlier, the Eagles have a really good run defense when they set up to face the run. You know that Rodgers is only going to throw the ball 7 times in the half, and you set up run defense the whole time. I think the Eagles are going to have it pretty easy. The Packers could come out and surprise, and I think make a game out of this, but I really think the Eagles are confident in them at a time. Monday night, maybe the worst Monday night game all season. I have Steelers and Colts. Colts are 2.5 favorites at home. I don't trust the Colts. I trust Kenny Pickett, whether he plays or whether he does. I don't even know who played for the fucking Steelers last week. But I like Kenny Pickett. So I'm taking the Steelers plus points. Easy. Moving on.
You're going to say that shit, too. I knew it. As much as it pains me, I gotta agree. I guess, yeah.
There are so many spreads, and there's so many games here that I just am not happy about. Please fade us all fucking weekend long, because it could get real fucking ugly this weekend. I'm telling you. All right. As always, lines are provided by FanDuel. This week, as of Wednesday, they are subject to change by game time. Please gamble responsibly. Remember that we're not providing gambling advice, solely providing our opinions and our picks for the games. If loved one has a gambling problem, please call Gambler. This one's run kind of long because we did cover 2 weeks, but I think that about wraps us up for this week, unless you got anything else.
No.
All right, sums us up. Plans are to get this back on track on Wednesdays each week. I'm not moving again. Should be a whole lot easier from here on out. So we will see you guys. Man, if it happens, I'm going to be just as shocked as you all are. Like I said, follow us on Twitter just in case something scuffed does happen to the podcast. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys here next week.